When night fell, the soldiers would return to the road and climb to the spot where their unfaithful guard was sleeping. They planned to go down the other side of the ridge so they could reach and attack the enemy camp at about midnight. On a sunny afternoon in the autumn of 1861, a soldier lay in a group of laurel bushes next to a road in western Virginia. He was lying flat on his stomach and his feet were resting on his toes. His head was placed on his left forearm. Meanwhile, his right hand held his rifle loosely. He looked so still that a person might have thought he was dead. However, his limbs were arranged in a regular way, and the cartridge box at the back of his belt moved slightly. This movement followed a steady rhythm, so it proved that he was actually alive. He was sleeping while he was supposed to be on guard duty. However, if someone found him, he would be killed quickly, because death was the legal punishment for his crime. He lay hidden in a group of bushes at the corner of a road that climbed steeply toward the south. At that point, the road turned sharply to the west, and it continued along the top of the hill for about 100 yards. The road turned south again and moved through the forest in a zigzag pattern. At the corner of the second turn, there was a large flat rock that pointed toward the north. This rock looked over the deep valley where the road began. It sat on the top of a high cliff. Therefore, if a person dropped a stone from the edge, it would fall straight down for 1,000 feet until it reached the tops of the pine trees. The soldier was lying on another part of the same cliff. If he had been awake, he would have seen the short part of the road and the rock that stuck out, but he also would have seen the whole side of the cliff below him. The height was very great, therefore, looking down might have made him feel dizzy. Men will fight in any place, even if the land is wild and difficult. Therefore, people make every landscape a stage for war. 5 regiments of Federal soldiers were hidden in a forest at the bottom of a valley, which was like a dangerous trap. This location was so narrow that 50 men could block the exits and starve an entire army until they surrendered. These soldiers were finally resting because they had marched for the whole previous day and night. The soldiers hoped to surprise the enemy because the road led directly to the back of their position. However, their situation would be extremely dangerous if the plan failed. Therefore, they would certainly be defeated if the enemy discovered their movement by accident or by watching carefully. Carter Druce was a young man from Virginia who worked as a sentinel, but at this moment he was sleeping in a clump of laurel bushes. Carter was the only child of wealthy parents in the mountain country of Western Virginia, so he grew up with a very comfortable and cultured life. His family home was located only a few miles from where he was currently lying. One morning, he stood up from the breakfast table and spoke to his father in a quiet but serious way. He said, "Father, a Union regiment has arrived at Grafton." Carter said that he was going to join the army. His father lifted his strong head, which looked like a lion's, and he looked at his son silently for a moment. Then he told Carter to go and do what he believed was his duty, no matter what might happen. He said that Carter was a traitor to Virginia. However, the state would have to survive without him. If we both survive until the end of the war, we can talk more about this matter later. However, your mother is in a very serious condition right now. The doctor told you that she only has a few weeks left to live, and this time is very precious. Therefore, it would be better if you did not disturb her at this time. Carter Druce bowed with great respect to his father, and his father returned the salute with very polite manners. This formal behavior hid the father's breaking heart, but he stayed calm during their goodbye. Finally, Carter left his childhood home so he could go away to serve as a soldier. Druce showed great courage and loyalty through his actions, so his fellow soldiers and his officers respected him. He also knew the area very well, and his leaders chose him for a dangerous job at a faraway post because of these skills. However, he was extremely tired, and this exhaustion was stronger than his determination. Therefore, he fell asleep while he was on duty. No one can say if a good or bad spirit appeared in his dreams to wake him, but something finally moved him from his state of crime. He was sleeping instead of watching for the enemy, so he was breaking the law, yet a mysterious force suddenly made him open his eyes. Everything was silent in the late afternoon, and Druce did not move. Suddenly, an invisible messenger of fate touched his mind and woke him up. This messenger whispered a mysterious word to his spirit. However, no human has ever spoken this word or remembered it. He quietly lifted his head from his arm and looked through the stems of the laurel plants that hid him. At the same time, his right hand naturally moved to grip his rifle. His first feeling was not fear. However, he felt a strong sense of artistic delight as he looked out. A statue of a man on a horse stood at the very edge of the cliff, and the tall rock looked like a giant pedestal. The figure was clearly outlined against the sky, so the scene was very impressive. It was completely motionless, so the rider appeared to have a great sense of dignity. The man sat on his horse in a straight and soldierly way, but he stayed completely still like a marble statue of a Greek god. His gray uniform matched the sky behind him, so it blended in with the background. The shadows softened the metal parts of his equipment, and the horse's skin did not reflect any bright light at all. A short rifle lay across the front of the saddle, and it looked shorter than usual because of the angle. The rider's right hand held the weapon firmly by the grip to keep it steady. However, his left hand was holding the horse's leather straps, so that hand was invisible and could not be seen. The horse stood out clearly against the bright sky, so its shape looked as sharp as a small stone carving. It looked across the wide space of air toward the tall cliffs on the other side. The rider's face was turned slightly away, so the soldier could only see the outline of his temple and his beard. The man was looking down toward the bottom of the valley from his position. Because the figure was lifted against the sky, it looked much larger than a normal person. The soldier felt that his enemy was very powerful. Therefore, the rider and horse appeared heroic and almost giant in